Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode and I have a topic that I want to dive into around managing overall stress load in one aspect, specifically from a training and nutrition perspective there. So I'm going to dive into that. But first, before I do that, if you are interested in learning about a body recomp, what it is, how to do it, 10 things you need, why it's important, focus on body composition, the two types of body recomp, and really you'll get this checklist and you'll have a better baseline understanding of everything that I talk about here and just in terms of how to actually change your body composition. So if you're interested in that, the link to that is in the show notes. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic. What I want to talk about is if you have a high resting heart rate, a low HRV, you're feeling beat up, you're under recovered, you're just going through a super kind of stressful period of time, and there's just a high stress load on the body, right? I've been talking a lot about this. I've gone over the 7 different types of stressors on the body. And then I have my 3-step framework to lowering this and building your capacity as well too. And so it's a 3-step framework. It's the first thing is we obviously want to reduce unnecessary stressors on the body. Second, we want to change our nutrition and training to match our current recovery where we're at. Okay. And then third, it's building our resilience and stress capacity over time because we do want to build it up. Not like when people hear stress, they think it's bad, and it's not necessarily bad. It's just when we have a lot of unnecessary stressors. And then we're also trying to change our body and perform. And again, at that point, when we have all these stressors on the body is generally just only focused on survival and getting back to normalcy, your body's not in a good state to adapt. You're not going to see any body composition change. And so we need to manage these. And that's a 3-step framework that I work on inside the performance recomp method is that, right? And so what I want to hit on today is within that 3-step framework, I want to hit on number 2, which is matching training output to in your nutrition to that. Okay. Like, how do we actually do that in practice and what does it look like there? Because again, at the end of the day, we know, okay, reducing unnecessary stressors, we have a good idea what that is. And we know that some things that we can do to increase it are going to be, obviously we want to exercise, but we need to be able to adapt to that exercise. We know that breath work, stress management, sleep, like those are all important things. But what I want to really hone in on is how do we adjust when this happens, right? Because this isn't, hey, you have this unnecessary stress, you just work on it for a day and then you're good to go, right? This is probably going to take a little bit of time. But then also, even if you have just a day where you're like super low, like again, HRV or high resting heart rate, like you're just under recovered there. So again, these are some like actual numbers that we can get in terms of resting heart rate's a good proxy of that. From my understanding though, the downside with resting heart rate is it's a little, I'm actually shocked by this, but from my understanding, it lags just a little bit in terms of, okay, by the time your resting heart rate's a bit higher, like that stress has already really been there. I personally find that I can tell, like when I know I'm under recovered, I look and my resting heart rate's higher. Again, we want to take it with some grain of salt, but a high resting heart rate is a good sign that you're under recovered, right? But either way, if you are seeing a higher resting heart rate than normal, then this is definitely a sign that you're under recovered. Same thing with low HRV. And this is a low HRV for you, right? When it comes to HRV, there's no universal number that's good. It's really all relative and to you. And so again, if that number is lower than what it typically is, that's a sign that you're under recovered. And then again, then we can go with some more subjective type feelings, like you're just feeling super beat up. You know, that feeling when you just have a lot of stress on the body, you have a lot of stress in general, you just don't feel as energized, you just don't feel as great. Under recovered, achy joints, things like that. Or you just know that like you're about to go through a super stressful time, or it is, right? Work change, moving, just a big life change, you're having a new kid, right? That's a sign that we don't need numbers to tell us that we're under a higher stress load during that time. So that's what we're looking at there. So when this happens though, when people go through these periods of time, again, whether they look at these HRV numbers, they look at resting heart rate, or again, it's just a super busy time and they're very stressed out. And again, not all stress is going to be psychological. There are a lot of stressors on the body as well too. But again, we're talking here like you have something going on. When this happens, most people default to one of two things. They just push through and ignore the signs, or they just shut it all down and stay inactive. And neither is going to be ideal. We want to find that middle ground there with that. So when we talk scenario 1, pushing through, your body's under recovered. And if you just keep hammering it, you're going to increase injury risk and you're going to just set yourself up for poor performance in the gym and in life and poor body composition outcomes. Your body's just not in a great state to adapt or grow. And like at this point, we can't just keep hammering it. That's not the answer. And that's where I see a lot of people that are really into fitness. They work full time, they have family responsibilities. They just always try to push through this, right? It's like a badge of honor when you get into fitness. Oh, I'm just going to push through anything. And again, I think there's this fine line of we need to push through hard times, but we also just can't constantly do that all the time either. It becomes a problem. And I just see that kind of become somebody's identity and they think that's what they need to do. I've been there. Like I know in the past, that was I still obviously identify as a fitness professional and someone who's into their health and fitness, but I think I take it from a much better lens now at this point. Like in the past, it would be like, oh, I'm going to wake up at 3 a.m. to go get my workout in before, right? Or, hey, I'm on a trip and I'm not hydrated. I didn't sleep as great as I normally do. I got to go get my workout in, right? You just push through these things. And I still push as hard as I could because you got to get a good workout in. You can't skip, right? And so, again, there's a time and a place for that stuff, but we have to be smart with it there. So, again, pushing through in certain situations is a good thing. But again, doing that all the time and to maybe the same intensity that you would typically is where you can run into some potential issues. And then scenario two is people do nothing, right? So we're not fragile. So we don't want to end up being like super sedentary. We don't want to skip meals now. We don't want to eat poorly because we're off plan now, right? That's what I see a lot. So people get super stressed and now they're to the point where it's like, I just got so much stress going on. I can't do anything. And again, that's not ideal either. Or people really look into these HRV numbers and resting heart rates and they're like, oh, you know what? It's super high or super low. All right, I'm not going to train now. So again, or I'm not going to move at all. I'm just going to do whatever. And so that's not what we want to do. So we don't want to fall on either ends of the extreme here with it. And same thing with doing nothing. It's okay. If you have one day where maybe you don't do anything, I would still always shoot for movement. I think we need to find ways to build movement into every single day, not just, again, one day out of 365. Okay. But most of the time we need to be I don't agree with the whole just not do anything for a day. We still want to get some sort of movement in. Again, doesn't have to be 20,000 steps. It can be 8,000 steps, right? That's a couple walks. Like if that's us, if that becomes something where people are like, oh, that's just, you got to give yourself a break. And says, okay, come on. You can't get 8,000 steps. That's just ridiculous. It's the same thing with tracking food. Like people will make it seem like it's this super obsessive thing when it's you like, people track all sorts of things but when it comes to like nutrition and things like that, people get like weird about it and say you're obsessive and things like that. And again, I'm not saying you need to track all the time, but it's just like you do what you want to do and what you think is going to help you there. And it can definitely become obsessive for people. And that's where we want to look out for it. That's why I'm saying like, hey, if you're that 6,000 to 8,000 step mark, it's okay. That's not really obsessive. That's just you doing what your body needs to do. And as I said, if you're sick or again, you have one day out of the year where, you know what, you just don't move much. All right, it is what it is. It's not like you're going to go backwards or anything like that. But again, we want to get away from this like we're fragile kind of mindset, right? Because I do feel like I've walked that fine line with some of my content and things like that in the past where it may have come off as us being hey, we want to lower all stress. Hey, you want to take light weeks, things like that. And, oh, hey, you don't want to push too hard, right? As I said, with the pushing through thing, but we're not fragile either, right? Like we are very adaptable. We're a very adaptable species and we're not fragile, right? We're anti-fragile and we become fragile by the things that we do over time, right? Not getting sleep dialed in, again, just having a high stress load on the body and then not doing things to also build your stress capacity. That's where people become super fragile. And that's what we want to avoid. So again, by no means is this, oh, hey, some cop out to just not train hard or do anything because we do need to do that. And again, we're not fragile. Like we want to have stress. But we want it to be the right stress. The problem is we just have all kinds of poor stressors all the time. So I think that's a big takeaway here is we're not fragile. I probably said that 15 times in the last 2 minutes, but again, that's like my big takeaway here with this. So we need to make sure that we're still staying active. We're still doing things. It's just a little bit different in terms of the intensity. And I just find that's where people struggle the most is it's most of the time, like when somebody comes to me, most people are all or nothing with things, right? They're 100% in all the time. They have to have intensity dialed to the max or they're not doing anything, right? And then there's just people just are not good at moderating that intensity and dialing back and understanding what they need to do and why they need to do it. And this was something that I struggled with too. I was definitely here. And I think this ultimately ends up being the thing that really bridges a gap between you seeing the results that you want to see and then also you getting off of that on and off cycle and that like you push super hard and then you don't do anything there. Again, if we can master this, like you're gonna set yourself up for long-term success there. Okay, so let's go into the training adjustments that we can make when you're experiencing this. And so I do want to say here, I do have a caveat here. So shoot, maybe I didn't put that in the post. It looked like it didn't make it into the post. So one caveat to all this is, okay, one day of this is not a sign that you need to make these adjustments, okay? This is more so, hey, this is going on for a couple days. This has been going on for a couple of weeks. That's where one day is a sign that you could be headed down that route and you could potentially do this, but it's not an automatic thing of, I just feel tired today. I don't think that's always the case either. So this comes with that skill over time, but just understand that just one day or a little like you feeling like that, yeah, just not for an extended period of time. Again, it's a sign that, okay, maybe we need to start to focus on this, but it's not an alarming thing. Now, again, a couple days in a row, 3 days in a row, now it's okay, hey, you're here at this point there, right? So just keep that in mind as well too. Again, it doesn't mean that if you have a high resting heart rate or really low HRV that you should just push through and push super hard. It's just that it doesn't automatically always have to be that way. All right, so training adjustments. Movement's a powerful stress regulator and it helps increase stress resilience, right? I talked about that in terms of the three-step framework here is we're also trying to increase our stress resilience and capacity because again, that's going to allow us to handle more stressors in life and that's going to allow you to bounce back quicker from those stressors. So you can handle more and you can bounce back quicker. And that's ultimately where we're trying to get people. The problem is the amount of stressors that people have in their current life is a lot of unnecessary stressors, and they're not necessarily stressors that are going to lead to you building your stress capacity. So that's where people that's ends up being the bottleneck for a lot of people, right? Their stress capacity is low, but their bucket's filled, and now it's this like vicious cycle of how do we get out of it? And this is partly what we can do here with this. So again, we're also trying to build that capacity over time, and exercise does that. But as I said, we run into the issue when we don't have the capacity to do it. And then it's that vicious cycle. And this is where we need to have this, we need to dial back this intensity potentially. As I said, intensity may need to be dialed back. How do we do that? We're looking at implementing more lower intensity cardio. So like zone 2 type work. So with this type of training, it can improve recovery. Okay. Again, we're potentially lowering some of that stress, but we're also potentially increasing that bucket over time as well too. And again, it makes you more resilient to stress and it doesn't come at a high fatigue cost. So we're not also really adding too much to that current bucket. So this is the type of work that we want to do. And I think we need to do this regularly, but during this time, we may need to include a little bit more of this. So if you're finding that your HRV is now consistently low, it's your resting heart rate's consistently high, you're just feeling super beat up, this is where now maybe we need to spend a whole training block with a little bit more lower intensity cardio. If it's, again, a short-term week thing, then maybe it's, hey, instead of your HIIT session, you're doing your kind of zone 2 type cardio instead. Or you're doing that lower fatigue, but training that's going to provide a stimulus and adaptation. That's what I mean there by that in terms of lower intensity cardio. So it's, hey, in general, you could need to do more because we need to find some training that's low fatiguing, but also going to raise your ability to be more stress resilient, or it's you're substituting it for a higher intensity session for the next week or two or whatever it may be, right? So we want to look at that. Now we want to switch to lifting with more RAR and potentially lower volume, right? So you still want to lift to maintain muscle and strength. And it also makes you feel great as well, too, right? Like mentally to get in there and still exercise and things like that. But this isn't the time to aim for PRs and push your volume and things like that. And it doesn't take much to maintain in the short term. So we can get away with this for a couple weeks at a time or even one training cycle. So we do have this option here. I think with this specifically, I would just keep your RAR more auto-regulated, right? I don't think this is necessarily something where it's like, hey, I'm going to go a whole block at 3 RAR. I think you could do, hey, for the next week, maybe I'm going to do closer to 3 to 4 RER, and then I'm going to switch. Maybe I'm just going to do one day, see how I feel, right? Whereas with the lower intensity cardio, again, we can have that auto regulation component that I talked about, but we may need to actually, for extended periods of time, throw in more low intensity cardio sessions to build up that capacity there with that. But again, big thing being, we probably want to lower our RER or increase our RERs, right? So you're going to train less hard, essentially, further from failure. And again, the cool thing with that is if you get to 4 to 5 plus RAR, you do that, like, again, if you did that for extended periods of time, would you end up losing muscle towards the tail end? Maybe a little bit, but I think in the short term, you're good to go to keep what you would have there. Daily walks, plus we want to do some restorative type movement, right? So we're not necessarily trying to double our step count, but we do want to make sure you're getting enough. Bonus if you can also get outside, because that's going to have the benefit of another kind of recovery aspect to it, where getting outside is good for us right now. The only time I would say that's not the case is if there's extreme temperatures one way or the other, then you still want to get outside, but then we just, again, have to dose it a little bit better there. But we also want to look at including restorative activities like easy yoga, not hot yoga. So people hear yoga and they automatically think like hot. No, we're not doing that because that's a more intense, like it's a lot harder than regular yoga. Some like mobility type work, light stretching, and this is going to help calm our nervous system. So you get this benefit of movement, but you also get the benefit of adding the recovery component to it. So you're getting movement in, so you're checking that off, but you're also getting added recovery in there. And that's really what we're trying to get here with all these things is we're trying to manipulate intensity in a way that you're getting movement in that's going to be great to help build your stress resilience, stress capacity. And a lot of this stuff is going to help with recovery. You're just getting multiple things here with this. I find that the more things that we can do and we can stack on top of each other, like those are always probably good things to do for most people. So that's kind of what we want to do from a training perspective. As I said, really the only one that like might be that we might add in and like really focus on like a training block for in terms of increasing would be your like lower intensity cardio. Otherwise, you can just use these things that more like from auto regulation standpoint. So again, if you have, let's say you have a period of time where you have a new child and the first 4 to 6 weeks are going to be super hard. Again, you're not going to be setting PRs from a weight training perspective. Maybe you do just stay closer to 2 to 3 RAR during that time. Again, you're going to maintain. And again, this is all on a sliding scale too. It doesn't necessarily have to be, hey, you have to train at this exact RAR. Maybe it is for a little bit right after you have the baby, you're closer to 4 to 5 RAR or 3 to 4 RAR, 1 to 2 sets. And then maybe as you get further out from that, it's okay, I'm still going to stay a little bit further away from failure, 2 to 3 RAR, but now maybe I'm doing 2 to 3 sets on there, right? So that's just a potential example of that. But again, we want to moderate that intensity and or volume there. All right, so let's talk nutrition adjustments. Again, we want to support our physiology so your body can bounce back. So at the very least, we want to eat at maintenance. So if you're in a deficit, or so if you've been eating in a deficit and these things are starting to really pop up, this is where we probably want to get to maintenance. Okay. And then even if you've been in a large surplus, like we probably want to dial back to maintenance as well too. So if you're, again, on either end of the spectrum, we probably want to come back to the middle here. Energy restriction or energy overload will add stress to your load, right? Balance is key here. So this surplus could be a purposeful surplus or it could be a unintentional surplus, right? Which a lot of people are in. What I will say, the only time you would potentially want to keep a surplus in would be if you're very lean. Then that would be a time that you probably would want to be at a little bit of a higher surplus to put on a little bit of body fat. So if you are like coming off of a really intense fat loss phase or something like that, and you're super lean, in order to recover, that would be really the only time I would suggest like getting to surplus. Otherwise, we would be wanting to get you at maintenance calories there. Ideally, we would add in more carbs. This is if appropriate. If you've been low carbs and you're training hard, then we would want to increase our intake, right? So because carbs are going to help support recovery, we just want to make sure your total caloric intake still aligns with maintenance calories. So you don't want to increase carbs to where now you're like in a huge surplus, but increasing carbs a little bit could certainly help here, right? So if you have been, let's say you're 150 pounds, you've been eating 200 grams of protein, 100 grams of carbs, and 60 grams of fat. I don't know what the calories are on that. I don't care. I'm just trying to make a point here. Maybe you drop your protein down to 150 and then you increase let's say now you have to add 200-300 calories in. I would put all those towards carbohydrates at that point, right? So you could be going from 100 grams of carbs to 300. Again, I don't know if the exact numbers come out exactly, but that's my line of thinking there with that. We want to prioritize nutrient-dense, anti-inflammatory foods. So we're looking at colorful vegetables and fruits, omega-3 rich foods, and or supplement, salmon, sardines, walnuts, things like that, omega-3s. Again, you're probably obviously you hear that's like, I'm not eating sardines. Totally understand. I wouldn't either. So again, maybe a little bit more salmon, but then you're also looking at omega-3 supplementation if you're not already doing that. You should be doing that anyways. But yeah, lean protein sources. So making sure you're getting lean protein sources, quality carb sources, potatoes, rice, oats, really any carb sources like that. The ones that we would just want to be careful with are like the highly processed type ones. Not to say that you can't have any of that during this time, but we want to focus on a little bit more of these types of foods. And then healthy fats, olive oil, avocado, nuts, seeds. So these are the types of foods that we would want to make up most of our diet. And then again, you can fit in a little bit. But what you wouldn't want to do is like, okay, cool, Jeff says increase my calories and carbs. Well, I'm going to eat a bunch of pizza and ice cream. It's like, okay, not what we want to do there with that. And then the next thing we want to do is dial back caffeine plus hydrate. So this isn't the time to increase your coffee/caffeine intake. If anything, we want to scale it back. And then hydration matters, and it's going to help with recovery. If we're not hydrated, that's going to be a constant stressor on the body, and a low-hanging fruit one, an easy thing that we can take care of there. Now, in saying this, we want to make sure though that when we get our electrolytes, when we get our hydration, it's not just water that we're pounding. It's, hey, we're also getting in some electrolytes as well too, right? So those are adjustments that we would want to make when you're feeling this way. Again, this is a core pillar inside the performance recon method. We want to learn how to understand your total stress load and how it impacts what you should and shouldn't do when it comes to training and nutrition, our body comp goals. And then we want to learn how to manage it effectively, and we want to become more resilient to that stress over time, because nailing these shifts is often the difference between actually making progress and then constantly crashing and just spinning your wheels and not making progress. So again, if we can nail this down, I really feel like this is where most people who enjoy exercise but are spinning their wheels, this is the loop that they get themselves in here. And again, there is a whole other side of this as well too, in terms of lifestyle factors that are super important, but I didn't want to dive into that today. I wanted this to be mostly nutrition and training related, because I think that's going to resonate with most people on there. And this gives you practical things that you can do right now if you're under this situation. So look, if you're someone who's into fitness and you never have to do this, I would be like, okay, something's going on here or overlooking something, and we definitely want to look into that, because I could just see a lot of people like, this isn't for me. But again, it is. And if you never feel like you have to do this, I think you're missing out there. So that's it for this episode. If this was helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, that will help more people find it. If you have any questions like on this topic or in general, you can reach out to me on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. So if you're not following me there, make sure you do. That's it for this episode. I'll chat with you guys next time.